Hi, I'm Phoenix. I've been disabled since after my car accident that has been affecting my mobility in real life. I love to fly airplanes and do educational activities in Second Life. I live in Japan and I teach English in SL. Dr. Henry Germain-McCarthy is Professor Emeritus at Louisiana State University Health Science Center, New Orleans. His research about and advocacy for disability rights is long-standing. He works to promote the legacies and leadership of disability activism movements and improve public awareness, professional education, and social policy regarding quality of life for all people. His session is titled, My Grateful Continuing Journey into Awareness, Advocacy, and Allyship for Disability Rights. Here's how he describes his session. I believe that interpersonal experiences and relationships, when reflected on and shared honestly, have great power to shape minds, hearts, and actions to improve quality of life for both the individual and community. Dr. McCarthy benefited from visiting and interacting with various people from more than 40 cities in the Caribbean, Central America, Europe, and the US, deepening his understanding on disabled people's lives and how to support them. Through today's presentation and research, he hopes to promote the broadening the coalition of collaborators working to establish disability access and accommodation for inclusive education, employment, healthcare, and recreation as human rights. Please refrain from questioning and comments during the presentation because Dr. Germain-McCarthy is still new to Second Life. There will be a discussion session after the presentation. Now, welcome, Dr. Germain-McCarthy. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nick, for that appreciative introduction. And I would like to say good morning or good afternoon to all the participants, wherever they are in their time zone. Before I start my PowerPoint, I would like to say a few things. First of all, let me say at the outset how honored and humbled I am to participate in this conference and all that it represents in terms of peer support, collaboration, volunteerism, open-mindedness, and advanced utilization of both virtual technology and helpful accommodations for everyone's needs. I'm an old guy and therefore not a digital native and not an early adopter of technology. This is my first visit to the virtual ability platform, and I'm enormously impressed with the colorful, exuberant, dynamic environment, which is beautiful and comforting. I'm really not familiar with any virtual worlds or social media applications, so I come here with some old school habits and tools, etc. And I hope that this is a useful presentation and mutual learning experience for all of us. And if it isn't, as they say in the 12-step recovery program, take what works conference, which is to share my personal and professional experiences that have led me to be an ally with the disability community for equity and justice. This talk is rather atypical for a formal conference presentation because the approach to the subject matter is biographical and autobiographical. I will be highlighting several activists and leaders in the disability rights community whose impressive work and spirit I have admired and promoted. Their creativity, perseverance, and accomplishment for the benefit of their community are gifts for all of us to explore, celebrate, and emulate. And I'm sure many of you in the audience will be familiar with many or maybe all of them. I'd like to, as another goal, offer some ideas at the end for expanding the network of disability justice allies and supporters. And again, I'd like to affirm that I have much to learn from you. I'm humbled and honored with this speaking and mutual learning opportunity. Many thanks. And I will note that throughout the slides, there will be periodic double R, capital, and a number in brackets, and that indicates related reading or resource that is in the list that is in the available in the handout box. And it's mostly additional readings related to the point at that juncture of the text. So I'll start with talking about a summer job that stimulated my career in devotion to disability rights. As an undergrad, I majored in psychology and chose summer jobs each year in a related setting to give myself some hands-on experience in different specialties within psychology. I worked in a recreational program that I developed and ran with two fellow students for youth who had been diagnosed with behavioral disorders at a community mental health center. The next summer, I was a dormitory attendant in a large residential center for adults with intellectual and other developmental disabilities. The third summer, I worked as an orderly or aide in a long-term care facility that we'll call FJG for men with significant physical disabilities. We were very short-staffed, and the work was the most challenging and exhausting I had ever done. That job was also the most intriguing and interpersonally enriching one I had ever had. And it started me on a career path that I pursued for the next 46 years. On the next slide, I'm going to introduce you to Frances White, who is my friend and teacher who never went to school. My first teachers in my chosen vocation to serve people with disabilities were a few residents of the SJG nursing facility where I worked for 3 summers, 1970, 71, and 72. Most influential for me was Frances White, who was unlike any person I'd ever met in many ways. He never went to school because he was truly, quote, bedbound, due to severe congenital deformities of his torso and extremities, a condition called arthrogryposis, that prevented him from breathing if he sat upright in a chair or from doing any activities of daily living physically. He also lived in a highly discriminatory era when kids with much fewer limitations were segregated into special classes, denied schooling, or were not even considered for it at all, as Frances was. Frances was more than 40 years older than I, but we became great friends. As I bathed, dressed, and fed him, I listened with fascination as he shared his mind and his world with me, a world of hobbies and relationships far from the single bed that he never left. I wrote letters that he dictated to pen pals he had in several cities around the globe. He learned Italian from listening to opera on public radio. With a clever sense of humor and an accepting ego, he psychosocial position of that person I enjoyed and learned from. On the next slide, I'm going to talk about two other SJG residents who sparked my interest in the disability experience. Another friend at SJG facility was Bobby Wong. He was placed there because he had quadriplegia and his family did not have adequate capacity for his care. He knew I empathized with his isolation there, being the youngest resident by many decades and the only deaf person. We corresponded after I left that job and moved far away. I shared in his delight when he wrote to me several years later that he was working at the nearby independent living center and when I visited him in his own apartment. A third notable SJG resident was Mr. L. He was a total contrast to Francis and Bobby. He complained often that the staff were slow or inept in providing his care, and that he enjoyed no intellectual stimulation there. He told me of being denied admission to Harvard University in 1940 when they learned he was disabled and used a power wheelchair. By far, he had the most visitations of all residents at SJG in many personal aspects. But he seemed very miserable about his life. I pondered these three men's ways of being and took the only path I was aware of at age 21 of trying to react helpfully from my inexperienced and naive perspective. I applied and went to graduate school in rehabilitation psychology to learn more about what I was observing. And now on the next slide, I will give credit to Beatrice Wright, who was my academic mentor. Beatrice was my major professor in graduate school and was known for the progressive principles about understanding and responding to disability that she proposed and argued for in her first book, published in 1960, and this is related reading number 1. And I say progressive because they were for those times. The three principles that I most embraced from that book and have tried to incorporate in various ways in my teaching, research, and community service throughout my career are: 1, emphasize an asset-focused approach that seeks out and exploits whatever strengths exist or can be developed to apply to a disability challenge or injustice. And this is in sharp contrast to the medical model's focus on the patient's pathology and deficits and efforts to fix them. Number 2, use an ecological interactionist approach to analyze disability issues. That is, be sure to assess and engage the assets and resources and the challenges or barriers within both the client and the physical and social environment in order to understand and tackle any concerns or issues holistically and pragmatically. Number 3, treat clients as, quote, co-managers, end quote, of their rehabilitation goals and plans. She devoted a whole chapter in her book to this principle, rooted in respect for their personal autonomy and the value of their knowledge gained from direct experience. Today, her ideas are widely expressed, though still not consistently implemented. But 60 years ago, they were quite groundbreaking. And I give reference to two resources, number 2 and 3, that are in the resource list. One is a film, and the other is an article about her work and legacy. This was before people were writing about concepts or strategies like disability rights legislation, physical and programmatic accessibility, the social model of disability, independent living, informed consent, shared decision-making, etc. And now on the next slide, I'm going to explain the bulk of my presentation, which will be to shine light on advocates and thought leaders in the disability community who most influenced me. I I've had the privilege to learn from many impressive thought leaders and advocates in the disability rights movement through their publications, presentations, consultations, legislative lobbying, public education, and other contributions to the movement. I will highlight 9 of them who have had the most influence on my disability justice awareness and my desire to spread the wisdom and inspiration of their work. And this is where I cite related reading number 4, which is an article that highlights and features 5 of the 9 people that I'll be talking about. I studied their contributions, had the opportunity to meet all of them, and worked collaboratively with several of them for at least a few years. I will briefly summarize their place in my pantheon of mentors and colleagues, and will identify the areas of their expertise that especially piqued my interest. They are given in alphabetical order without noting their degrees, because their identities and achievements were grounded in justice work, not the fame or prestige that their superb talents earned them. And my first mentor and colleague was Adrienne Ash, who lived from 1946 to 2013. She was a feminist scholar in disability studies, a bioethicist, a mentor to many, and an accomplished vocalist. Adrienne Ash. Upon graduation from Swarthmore College, which is an academic powerhouse, she was rejected for every job she applied for. When told once outright by a receptionist who did not let her in for the interview, it was simply because she was blind and was told to do that by the boss. She insisted on staying there until she was interviewed as scheduled. She was forced to leave, however, by the security staff. She tried to file a job discrimination case, but there were no such federal or state laws based on disability. So she started lobbying for one and didn't stop until the New York Human Rights Law was amended in 1974 to cover disability. Adrienne was skilled in promoting equity for women and disabled folks through a range of interpersonal approaches. She was a consultant all over the world, a licensed therapist, and a professor. And this is where I cite related reading number 5, which is an article that we wrote together about infusing a disability into the psychological curriculum. She was also renowned as an expert and spokesperson on the impact of attitudes about disability on bioethical decisions about the value and lives of the unborn and people with disabilities. And here I will quote a tribute that was included in a memorial article, which is related reading number 6, that perfectly captures her intellect and personality. Quote, Ash had an endearing ability to be at once gracious and confrontational, passionate and prickly. She was always open to differing views, but she never compromised her insistence on absolute respect for the lives and perspectives of people with disabilities. She was known for asking probing questions to identify common values and expose disagreements that needed to be hashed out. End quote. Next is my dear friend Susan Daniels, who lived from 1948 to 2011. She was an astounding educator, a disability policy innovator, a motivation speaker, and an early adopter of technology. I also refer to her as a fun entrepreneur, which is a term I've adopted for an entrepreneur of fun. Susan M. Daniel. I knew Susan the best of the leaders I'm highlighting in this talk. We were work colleagues and close in age, but she was so astute, clever, and helpfully frank that I often felt like she was my mentor. She certainly was for many people. Starting in the 1970s, she did groundbreaking workshops and authored publications on sexuality and disability for folks with a disability, parents, and various healthcare professionals, many of whom avoided the topic of sexuality due to their personal discomfort or lack of describes one of her major policy achievements. Quote, she was both a policy wonk and an activist, and was as comfortable debating scholarly economists as organizing community stakeholders. Perhaps Susan's greatest accomplishment was the Ticket to Work and Work Incentive Improvement Act of 1999 that created employment incentives and health care provision for workers with disabilities and removed many of the systemic barriers that forced many individuals with disabilities to choose between health coverage and work. And that is from the website disabilitypolicyworks.org. And this is a consulting organization and mentoring collective that Susan established when she retired from her full-time employment. Susan was unusual and truly endearing because of the balance she demonstrated in her life. She was passionate about both the serious work she pursued and the fun time she created for her colleagues and friends. And related resource number 7 is a film that I made from a lecture that Susan gave to one of my classes. Next is Justin Dart Jr., who lived from 1930 to 2002. He was a disability and economic justice activist, a coalition builder, and a kind heart. Justin Dart. Born into a wealthy family, Justin got polio as a teenager and later succeeded in the family business. He resigned to devote his life to humanitarian service. He pursued disability rights through varied advocacy roles in federal government positions, legislative lobbying, and grassroots organizing. He visited all 50 U.S. states at least 5 times to educate citizens and advocate for passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. And related reading number 8 is the short article that I wrote when I met him through hosting one of his citizenship summits that he had in one of those cross-country trips to advocate for ADA. Then he focused his efforts on healthcare reform and economic justice. He and his wife, Yushiko, mentored many immigrant women in a cooperative living and learning arrangement in their home. He was adept at coalition building, as expressed in this quote that summarizes his mission. Quote, empowerment is when government joins with business, labor, religion, and individual citizens to guarantee every person the tools to govern, to produce, and to live the best life possible for self and for all. And that quote is from the website independentliving.org. Next, I have a photo of the signing ceremony for the Americans with Disabilities Act on July 26, 1990, on the lawn at the White House. And Evan Kemp is first from left to right on the front row, and then President H.W. Bush, and then Justin Dart. And then in the back row is Reverend Harold Wilkie and Sandra Perino, all of whom were very involved in disability rights movements. And I included this photo because I met Reverend Wilkie, who lived from 1914 to 2003, at a lecture he gave in 1972. I am thankful to him and later to the transformative thinking of psychologist Carolyn Bash, who lived from 1934 to 2015, who also had a disability, for cultivating my interest in exploring the varied connections between spirituality and disability. I was privileged to collaborate with each of them on presentations and publications. And here on your slide, it has related reading number 9, and this is the beginning and it should be because this was not included in the list. Next is Lex Friedan. He was a disability policy. He is, a disability policy expert, a pioneer of independent living services, a researcher, and a disability ambassador. And I give his website at the top of the next slide under his name. Lex Friedan has a long legacy in advocacy and policy making on many disability issues and injustices. His networking, lobbying, and writing were instrumental in shaping the ADA of 1990. He also led the federal panel for instituting its 2008 amendments. He was one of the pioneers in the philosophy, policy, and research regarding the independent living movement and continues in that leadership role. Through his own life-threatening experiences as an electric wheelchair user during hurricanes and power failures, he developed expertise in preparedness, evacuation, and support needs of persons with disabilities in such disasters. Lex is highly experienced in working within political and governmental systems, organizations for rehabilitation, consumers and providers, and International Disability Association. Next is Eileen Heron, who is a disability rights activist, developer of the business enterprise to employ folks with disabilities, a mentor to many people, and an artist. Eileen Heron. She is the founder and executive director of Psychosocial, a collective of disabled self-advocates working on human rights, independent living, vocational training in their small business, which is called Chicali Ceramics in El Salvador, Central America. And its website is chicali.com. This multi-talented leader has held several posts in Disabled Peoples International, including chair of the Latin American Women's Committee. She led a unique project in which more than 100 Salvadorans with disabilities were trained and accredited to monitor their 2003 national election. Eileen affirms, quote, democracy can only be built with the participation of all. Otherwise, democracy is not genuine. She's an electric wheelchair user who wants her epitaph to say, quote, you don't have to walk in order to fly, end quote. Next is Judy Heumann, perhaps known to everyone. She's really widely famous. She is a disability rights activist, the icon of disability pride and self-determination, and the co-founder of World Institute on Disability. Judy Heumann. Judy was denied admission to kindergarten and denied a teaching job upon college graduation because she used a wheelchair and was considered a safety hazard. Quote, that is what fueled her lifelong fight for disability rights. Her parents won the first battle against the school principal. 21 years later, Judy won the second one by suing the New York City school system. In 1970, Judy and some fellow activists in Brooklyn founded Disabled in Action, and that's the name of their website, disabledinaction.org, a civil rights organization committed to ending discrimination against people with all disabilities. And here's where we begin this numbering. So RR number 10 there is actually RR number 9 on the related resources list. And that is an article that I wrote with a colleague. We interviewed Judy, and it's the transcript and comments on that interview. Judy was the leader of 150 disabled people who locked themselves in the San Francisco Federal Building in 1977 to demand the implementation of U.S. history. All of their demands were met, and they went home. Note this quote from her 2021 memoir, which will be RR number 10 on your list. Quote, change never happens at the pace we think it should. It happens over years of people joining together, strategizing, sharing, and pulling all the levers they possibly can. Things start to happen, and then suddenly, seemingly out of the blue, something will tip. End quote. And also, I'll mention Crip Camp, which is a fabulous 2020 documentary film of one summer at a sleepaway camp for youth with disabilities, where Judy worked and demonstrated her passion for instilling self-determination in disabled people and all of the young adults that attended that camp. Next is Ralph Hodgkin. He is a designer of sustainable wheelchairs, an entrepreneur, educator of folks with disabilities in under-resourced nations, and a disability justice activist. Ralph Hodgkin. In 1980, Ralph started working tirelessly to design sustainable wheelchairs that, one, can handle rough and otherwise difficult terrains, and two, can be constructed entirely with locally available parts. He taught disabled folks in under-resourced countries worldwide how to maintain and repair the rugged wheelchairs and assisted them to turn these skills into income-generating, sustainable small businesses. His innovative rehabilitation engineering work earned him the MacArthur Foundation Genius Fellowship. He used that time and money to expand his enterprise by co-founding Whirlwind Wheelchair Incorporated, that now manufactures and or distributes durable wheelchairs in 60 countries. As the website explains, a wheelchair is not just hardware, but a means of self-actualization and social change. Quote, a functional wheelchair designed for the challenges of its environment is a tool that enhances the rider's ability to participate in family, social, and economic activities, as well as enhances public perception of the capabilities and value of people with disabilities. End quote. Next is Harry Lang. He is a scholar of the culture, education, and history of deaf people. He is a science educator and prolific author. Harry Lang. Harry is among the most productive and well-rounded persons I've known, as exemplified by these diverse interests and accomplishments. He has almost 100 publications, including 15 books, many of them on varied topics that highlight the contemporary and historical contributions of deaf persons. Subjects include activists, actors, athletes, entrepreneurs, journalists, scientists, soldiers, teachers, and technologists. While his international stature in deaf studies and research on science education has brought him into scholarly activities with many famous scientists, such as Stephen Hawking, Carl Sagan, Linus Pauling, and Isaac Asimov, his heart and soul are focused on practical tools for the equitable and effective education of deaf students at all levels and the appreciation of deaf culture. For example, he created an American Sign Language online lexicon of technical terms in math and science and co-authored the widely used textbook Educating Deaf Students in 2001. He has served as a consultant and content expert for a major documentary film, museum exhibitions, many professional associations, and schools. All the while, he is a down-to-earth, witty guy who loves to tell jokes. Next is Peg Nozick, who lived from 1952 to 2020, and I'm sure she's familiar to many of you. She was a disability justice activist, the director of a research center on women's wellness, and an accomplished musician. Margaret, or as I called her, Peg Nozick. As a past member of Virtual Abilities Board of Directors and a former conference speaker, Peg is familiar to some or most of you. Her prolific publication list disability, assistive technology, and universal health care. She was equally skilled and engaged in various methods of improving life for her disability peers, such as designing rigorous research projects, founding and directing the Independent Living Center in Austin, Texas, joining advocacy demonstrations in the streets, and consulting online. In 1993, Kate founded the Center for Research on Women with Disabilities in Houston, Texas. Until her death, she served as its executive director. She designed and conducted research and training projects funded by the most respected competitive grant agencies in the U.S. And some of her recent studies were conducted using this Second Life platform. Next, I will mention some other resources that taught me about self-advocacy, self-determination, and self-help. I got to know other movers, shakers, trailblazers in disability movements from the following organizations whose activities I was honored to participate in and promote. I thank them for their acceptance of my listening, learning, and trying to help their causes to the extent I could. First is ADAPT, which is an acronym now for American Disabled for Attendant Programs Today. A fabulous activist in the streets group. The Mayor's Advisory Council on Disability Issues in New Orleans, Louisiana. Organization of People Undaunted by Stroke in Queens, New York. Peer counselors at the National Spinal Cord Injury Association New Orleans chapter. Peer counselors at New England Rehabilitation Hospital in Woburn, Massachusetts. The Society for Disability Studies, which is, again, a fabulous scholarly and mentoring and critical thinking professionalist and practitioner association, and the Vietnam Veterans Drop-In Center in Queens, New York. Next is a picture of a very crowded disability advocacy march. And in the front row, third from the left, is Judy Heumann. And first from the right is Justin Dodd, who we've just met. And the banner in the photo, which reads, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," which is a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. And this maxim underscores the common cause of all liberation movements, fighting injustice. And so now I will transition to a few ideas. None of them are new or earth-shattering. I just mention them because I think they should be repeated until we get the job accomplished. So here are some ideas for growing coalitions and allies. 1. Invigorate intergroup collaboration and coalition building among the disability, healthcare, and rehabilitation communities to expand the size and power of the network of advocates and supporters for disability justice issues. For decades, the disability community has been fragmented into diagnostic-based organizations. This has constrained their fellowship, networking, and advocacy activities. I give gold stars to virtual ability for demonstrating just the opposite by cultivating cross-disability and international participation and exchange. So, like they're doing, let us all invest in building more such coalitions and collectives. And one that I give reference to is Since Invalid, which is disability justice collective and performance space and group that wrote a book, which is the basic reading will be actually number 17. It's really a fascinating read and very energizing. Regrettably, rehabilitation services professionals and consumers have not enjoyed the high level of mutual appreciation and trust that they could expect, given the common ground they share. Differences of socialization experience, power, and perspective between professional outsiders and disabled insiders can sabotage productive partnerships. And there's an article there that I wrote about this regret and ideas for moving forward. I believe the provider community's allyship, earned by following the lead of the disabled community and collaborating in their advocacy efforts with humility and requested resources, will maximize their individual and mutual success. My second idea for growing coalitions and allies to disability justice is to, and some of these things were mentioned in the previous talk, educate policymakers and fellow citizens by explaining how changes that promote disability justice also benefit the common good. For example, universal design makes things easier for everyone to access and use. Full employment strategy with needed accommodations or support provides a more flexible, successful work environment and creates stronger economy by increasing the tax-paying population. Meaningful social inclusion creates higher morale due to less stress from isolation, thereby improving the mental health and quality of life of the individual and the community. And my third suggestion is to get disability incorporated into the BIPOC acronym. BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color, and that is a diversity framework used in social media and academia, etc., to designate groups that, due to historical and persistent discrimination, deserve intervention and attention for attaining social justice. So my suggestion is to get those communities to add the for or disabled to make it BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and People of Color, or disabled. My closing message is this. Each one of us is a worthy, ever-changing, interdependent person with needs to be fulfilled and contributions of time, talent, and soul to give. That is why everyone deserves and benefits from an inclusive world where disability justice and human rights are embraced and effectively enforced. Let us be joyful as we collaborate to achieve that liberated, accommodating world together. I am eager to learn from your comments and questions in the limited time now, but also in the future, whenever you contact me. Thanks for your acceptance, attention, and interest. Namaste.
Henry, this is Jentle. That was a very interesting presentation. Thank you so much for sharing. You've really got some wonderful friends. I do have a question. How can we, a virtual community, assist in your mission?
Well, I think I should ask you that question. I think you're doing fabulous work, and you're doing it at the cutting edge of technology and social media and inclusiveness. I certainly will, give it my voice. I mean, probably that is the only skill and asset that I have in this whole realm of disability justice is that, as a quite privileged person because of, the demographics that I was born with and, being a white person and having the benefits of a lot of education and what that provided me in terms of like opportunity to meet people and from all over the world and people of all stripes and contributions and backgrounds and levels of development. And what I had done is to try to use my opportunities, my platforms, my venues, my ability to write articles and get published, to showcase and educate the broader public and the professional, helping professional community. And so, that's what I try to do. That's my opportunity opportunity, and I've been retired for a bunch of years, but I'm still doing the same thing because I hope it's helpful and it is something that I can do, and as long as I have the voice and the platform and the listeners, I will do it. Is there any other questions?
Mook asks, your mention of Beatrice Wright made me sad. Oh, sorry. Gentle, did you have something to say? Sorry, are you okay if I read Mook's question?
She's asking if Mook is okay if she can read her question.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Mook asks, your mention of Beatrice Wright made me sad. As you said, her work preceded disability rights legislation, physical and programmatic accessibility, the social model of disability, independent living, informed consent, shared decision-making, and more. And yet, today, policy everywhere rarely takes her extraordinarily important input aboard. The ADA was signed 30 years ago after her book. Do you think the ADA has been built upon by Beatrice's ecological and interactionist approach? Does it consider it? If not, why?
I think it does, in that, there is focus on, the built environment, certainly, more so than the programmatic environment, I think. It's because lots of us think very concretely. And, it's easy to see the steps in front of the building as being a barrier, but not seeing all of the other ways in which we do not accommodate the spectrum of human abilities and needs and ways of being in the world. And I think probably the structure of the ADA has some problems that I see. And number one is that the enforcement mechanisms are weaker than the, quote, mandate. In that, for example, in order to, get your just due with regard to a case of discrimination, you have to file it. There isn't a set of watchdogs who are out there, monitoring situations and collecting data to find out where the gaps are. The person has to, experience discrimination, have the courage to face the bureaucracy and all of that. So I think, the enforcement mechanisms are weak in that regard. And that, it requires, unlike, for example, when they did school desegregation, when they tried to enforce that law, the president at the time, Kennedy and Eisenhower, whoever, back in the late 50s and 60s, they sent, National Guard troops into schools where principals and governors would block discrimination. So they applied the force of the government to say, yes, this is a law and you're going to obey it. Whereas if someone, is discriminated through the ADA, they have to, as I said, take individual, what is called individual right of action. So I don't know whether that answers your question, but it is a concern that, certainly is voiced by the disability community. And I think it takes a lot of energy and education and stick-to-itiveness to, tackle all of the barriers that still exist. And a lot of it is, attitudinal as well, in that if people were aware of how badly their ableism interferes with other people living, then I think a lot of people are well-meaning enough that they would just do something about that on their own. But they're unaware of it because they don't personally experience it, or someone in their family doesn't. I hope that was helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a comment from iSky. iSky loved the photo of Rafe Hotchkiss, professional tinkerer. And Dee Dee Baker asks, have you ever thought about becoming a regular SL resident, a regular resident in Second Life?
Actually, I haven't. And this experience has been one that, makes me feel like I definitely owe all of you, y'all, as we say in New Orleans, a good try. And I'm sorry that I'm such. Just to let you know, and this again is an autobiographical anecdote, but one of my friends in college used to call me a self-styled anachronism, and that I always loved things from the past, and I saw the richness and the value in those, and was never excited about new technology. I always had to be dragged kicking and screaming, not kicking and screaming, but just saying, well, I think I'm doing okay without a computer or without a cell phone, all those things. And so, I will own that as a personal, and if we want to call it, an area in need of development. But I'm trying to be open, and I guess also it's just as we all have time crunches, and it's easy for me to jump into something that I already know and think that I do well enough to be effective in the way that I want to be, etc. But I'm certainly open to it, and I have sons who are very tech savvy and are out there doing all sorts of stuff with film and music, etc. And they bring me along, although they're very respectful of my self-styled anachronistic ways. So I'll remind them to be more pushy with me and helpful.
Henry, I think you've done a great job, and we certainly feel your presence, and you've joined us in the way that you feel most comfortable, and I think that just speaks to the kind of culture that this community promotes. Mook wanted you to know, thank you for answering her question. She said that's illuminating, yes, and it does need more work still. Gentle asks a question. What are some ways you see to interface our virtual environment with the independent living movement? Can we help make that movement more successful?
Oh, well, let me think. I think one of the challenges with the independent living movement probably is that, they're very wisely prioritizing, deinstitutionalization, getting people, and that's what ADAPT does. The organizations, they are working to get people who want to be in different environments than what Medicaid will subsidize for them, and so that are more, quote, independent living out in the community. I prefer to call it, because all of us are very interdependent, and no one is, independent in any meaningful way, no matter how, quote, skilled or experienced they are. But at any rate, in community living situations, but it's not just a matter of getting people out of, segregated and regimented environments like skilled nursing facilities, etc., into their own community, but it's also getting them included in that community. And that's the challenge, that you can put the person in the more desirable physical state, but you also need, and again, this is that ecological approach, you need to work with that individual to give them the assertiveness skills, the social mobility skills, and the physical mobility skills, transportation or whatever would be needed to get around their environment. But you also need to work on the environment, the physical environment and the social environment. You need to cultivate a sense of community, of broad, inclusive sense of community whereby people, that person's neighbors, need to say, this guy is part of our community, this woman is part of our community, and we need to make sure that she's, looked after in terms of any of us. When if I go out of town, I ask people, look after my house, look after, taking my mail, etc. They need to, I check in on people that I know are more limited in their finances or their mobility to get out and about. And so, because I'm not going to necessarily see them out and about, I feel like I need to, make an effort to check in on them and see how they're doing socially and all of that. So it really is the joint interaction of the responsibilities of the client the person, the individual, the community member, and all of that physical and social environment system around them to do their part. And their part is bigger because they're part of creating that environment. The person is just trying to do their best, living and working and recreating in that environment. But the bigger burden is on the quote, social, physical, bureaucratic environment to facilitate that inclusiveness in choice, in living fully a quality of life in the community.
Thanks, Henry. Just a few more comments. Orange said, when you were talking about coming into Second Life, he said that was an amazingly polite way to say that Second Life is too hard, and that's okay. Mook took a picture of you presenting in Second Life, and she said, Henry, show your friend this photo of your, quote, self-styled anachronism, not, unquote, smiley face, smiley face.
Self-styled anachronism. Well, oh God. Well, that was when I was in college and wore nostalgia clothes before they had them in thrift stores. I do now. I don't know. I still listen to the radio a lot, and my son has given me earbuds, and says to me periodically, "Are you using those earbuds? I'm going to take them away from you if you don't use them." And it's just it's habits. I don't think of myself as a rigid person, but I'm sounding like a very habituated person. But anyway, so I guess that's a good example, is that I love the radio. And he did give me a Google Home, which I use, and I love it, because I can just say, I want to hear, Joni Mitchell or John Denver or, any of my favorite singers. And I can't do that with the radio. But the radio is what me to just sort of accept whatever they give and be content. And, can't change the channel, which I do frequently. But at any rate, I don't know whether that helps. But, I do have hope, that I will bridge that community. I'll tell you one thing, it's glorious to look at. It's just visually appealing. I mean, I could just watch it like I watch it at it's very, relaxed and calm and satisfied. So, that's not the use that you want me to have, but that's the level of appreciation that I'm at right now, and I'm just being very honest about it. And I appreciate your eagerness to get me on board, and I will try. Maybe I'll make that a New Year's resolution. You give me 4 months in my self-styled anachronism.
Well, as Orange says, and that's okay, right? Gentle has a question. She says, what is your next real life project?
Real life project. Well, one of the things that my wife and I do are we work for HeartGift. We volunteer for HeartGift, and that is an organization that partners with several hospitals Hospital here in New Orleans. And they partnered with very under-resourced countries throughout the world where children are identified through a doctor or a nurse or other health practitioner who has a certain type of congenital heart defect that if it is not repaired, by the time they're 5 or 8 or something like that, they will die. And if it is repaired, they have a normal lifespan. And so we have been a heart gift host for several children, mostly from Haiti, because my wife is born in Haiti and speaks fluent Creole, and I am good enough in French to converse and take care of people's needs. And so most of ours have been from Haiti or from Francophone countries in Africa. And they come and live with us for about 6 weeks at a time. And they're always accompanied by one parent or guardian. And they live in our home where we provide all of the resources, the transportation they have lots of visits to the hospital. And we just try to make them feel home in a very strange land when they're undergoing really stressful situations about, approaching this potentially life-saving but also risky heart surgery, some risk, not a highly risky procedure, but at any rate, and it's just been wonderful. And it fills your week to be doing this. And, we show them all around New Orleans, take them fun places and the zoo and all. And we do fundraising for them, but we also do fundraising for projects in Haiti. And we're trying to help right now they are in such horrendous situations because of the insecurity and the chaos and the lack of a viable government. But we're trying to we sponsor lots of kids to go to school because there's no public education system in Haiti. And
Okay. Thank you, Henry. We really appreciate it. That's all the time that we have for now for questions. Ches, you might want to unmute your mic there. We've had a few comments just saying, just to thank you. Lori said, that's awesome, and nice guys. This isn't the last time that we see you in Second Life.
Well, I hope it's not either, and I'll make an effort to come and visit and see what's going on, and celebrate with you the work that you're doing, and I certainly will promote it for a great oasis and supportive community, and just caring, clever people, and that's what we need to be around and to create more of. So thank you so much. It was a true honor and, just a wonderful experience for me, and I thank you for that. And namaste.